All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started tonight. We are in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. So I wasn't here last Wednesday. I was out of town, but the Wednesday before that, we finished chapter 7, obviously. So it's good. We had a little bit of a break, but we ended chapter 7 right at the end of a section of the book, and chapter 8 begins a new section, so it's kind of starting fresh for us. But chapter 8 and 9 together both kind of deal with some doctrinal matters that the apostle has to address. A lot of the first half of the book was about the false teachers that he's been contending with, that the Corinthians have kind of gotten in bed with. Also, their own failings in that regard. That's a lot of that focus on the first half. It'll come up again toward the end of this second half of the book. But right now, as I say, there's some doctrinal stuff. Starting with, we need to talk about, in this context, giving. It was a subject that came up in 1 Corinthians as well, but it's approached from a different perspective here. Let's start in 1 Corinthians, go to the end of 1 Corinthians, and look at chapter 16, 1 Corinthians 16, and somebody out loud, please read verses 1 and 2. 1 Corinthians 16, verses 1 and 2.
Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed to churches in Galatia, so also do you. On the first day of every week, each of you put something aside and store it up, as you may prosper, so that there be no collecting when I come.
All right, so this is a verse we use a lot to talk about just our regular weekly contribution. That's a fine application of the text. But specifically, what was going on was there was a gathering up of a collection for a specific purpose that various churches were contributing to. It wasn't just, keeping the lights on, which they didn't have lights back then, but, sort of regular contribution. This was a specific offering that was being collected, literally collected, gathered up from amongst various congregations to be delivered to those who were in need. Specifically, we find out in history it was in Judean churches, and it's also alluded to in the New Testament too. But so a bunch of Gentile congregations were gathering up their money to give to Paul and others along proxy with Paul, to give to Judean congregations who were going through an economic downturn, needed some serious help in the midst of their trial. So Paul writes what he writes at the end of 1 Corinthians. Basically, the last thing he says before your standard, say hello to everyone for me, kind of ending to his letters. The last thing he says, really, of any kind of doctrinal weight is, make sure you are already gathering up that money because I'm going to be there soon. Well, we found out he actually didn't get there, but that's a whole different issue. At the time, he was saying, I'll be there soon, and I don't want when I get there for you guys to say, oh, yeah, right, and have to hurry and scramble to get the money together. You should already have it ready so that we can get this money out to the hands that it needs to be gotten to. So that's 1 Corinthians 16. So this has already been on the docket. This is not breaking news. You should have your contribution ready to go for Paul or whomever, Titus, whoever it may be, to come gather that contribution from you and from other churches to distribute it. Well, as we'll see in this context, they had started and then just stopped. You can speculate as to why, but for some reason they had not continued gathering up a contribution to give ultimately to these brethren in Judea. And so Paul has to write, and what he writes in this chapter is a brilliant dissertation about what congregational giving looks like. And a congregational giving is nothing more than just a bunch of individual Christians giving as part of a congregation. All right, there's not like two different checks here. It's your checks, all of us together, all of our cash in the plate, all of our dollars and cents in the plate, all of our checks in the hat, all combined together as one congregation, giving toward a need, giving toward a purpose, whatever it may be, by the discretion of the eldership or whomever. So this chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians breaks down not just the mechanics of it, which there are no mechanics of it. You pull the money out of your wallet and you put it in the passing plate or whatever variation there may be. The mechanics are not the problem. It's the motivation behind the giving that is the problem. The reason why congregations struggle with giving. The reason why some Christians have a hard time giving. The reason why preachers find it difficult to talk about giving is because we've made such an issue of it. And if we would nail down this one aspect of it, we wouldn't have to be so awkward about it. It wouldn't be a taboo subject. It wouldn't be a third rail subject. It would just be a natural part of our discussion. We would talk about it as freely as we talk about the other worship commands, like singing or like prayer. It is just as much an aspect of our worship as those. In fact, giving is the purest expression of worship that we have if you consider the whole idea of worship from beginning of time to present. If you asked a random Jew from the Old Testament, what does giving look like? The first thing they say is, do you see that lamb over there? That's my best lamb. I'm saving that one for when I sin. And that's the one I'm going to have to give to God. Or do you see that lamb over there? I just sinned yesterday. That lamb's got to die. Their idea of giving was a sacrifice. It was giving, literally giving something of theirs so that they felt the sting of it. They appreciated the sacrifice they were making. Now, this kind of giving, it's not a perfect one-to-one to a sin offering kind of sacrifice. But the idea of giving, the basic, distill it down to its basic form, is the same thing. When you're putting money in a plate, it needs to be a sense of sacrifice. In that case, it is an expression of your servitude to God. It is not like paying the electric bill. It should not feel the same as paying the mortgage payment, where you have to begrudgingly write the payment to the bank. You have to begrudgingly write the payment to the electric company that upped your rates, or begrudgingly write your payment to Dish Network. You keep jacking up the prices. It's not like that. God is not your electric company. Giving to God is not supposed to be, well, I guess I got to do that again. It's supposed to be an expression of your heart already belonging to God. It is already His. You are already His. Therefore, the wallet in your pocket is also already His. What He asks for you, what He asks from you is you. But He doesn't say specifically, I'm going to want all that money and I'm going to leave you broke. He's not asking you to be like those monks that you read about that just live in caves and they wear rags all the time and they don't have anything. That is not what He's asking of you. What He's asking is you give Him your heart. And from your heart, you will give whatever you can give. You will give not what you think you have to give. That's a negative attitude. It's a positive attitude. You will give what you can give to whatever good spiritual causes there are to give to. That's all baked into 2 Corinthians chapter 8. With all that said, verse 1. Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. This letter is called 2 Corinthians. Corinth was a major city of Achaia. Greece, the whole big country, was divided into a northern and southern part. There's Macedonia and Achaia. Macedonia is in the north. Lots of big cities over there. Lots of congregations of Christ there. Achaia rather, is in the south. Corinth, one of, if not the principal city of Achaia. And lots of congregations there. Corinth, here, the one we're getting to, being the most predominant one. So he starts by saying, I want you guys to be aware of what the Macedonian brethren are doing when it comes to this subject. They are giving abundantly. Now, you may or may not know this. It may or may not even matter because it's not a biblical topic, but just to give some historical context to this, in the middle of the first century, the whole region of Greece and Macedonia, Achaia, and all of that was going through a little minor civil war, an internal skirmish amongst themselves, major political upheaval and so forth. Those sort of trying times was where you get into the butter or guns, or I guess back then it'd be butter or blades sort of mentality. Are we going to have the funds to defend ourselves, or are we going to eat? Because if I can pay for the weapons, then I'm not going to have as much food. If I pay for more food, I'm not going to have as much weapons. And that balancing act was necessary back then because they didn't just print money like we do today. They actually had a finite amount of capital. They had to decide how to spend it. So when you're going through a minor political turmoil, civil war, guns are going to take precedence over butter. So they were going through hardships too. They were going through a financial burden too. In Macedonia, they were feeling an economic downturn. And yet Paul says I want you guys to be aware of how liberal and charitable the Macedonian churches are in their giving. And he says that to shame the Corinthians, just a few miles down south, for not being the same way. Verse 2. Those Macedonians, how in great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. Was the congregation rich? Were the congregations of Macedonia rich? No. What they were rich in was liberality. Where they were wealthy was in a willingness to give. Where they were in abundance was their charitable spirit. In terms of the actual dollars and cents, they had very little. But God has never been a God who cared about the dollars and cents. God has never been a God who compared your bank account to the money you put in the plate. It's always about your heart. And if you get your heart right, The balance of bank account to plate giving will balance out. It'll be spiritual and appropriate. But if you start caring about that, if you start nickeling and diming God, then it becomes a heart problem, and that's the problem. The Macedonians didn't have a lot to give, but they gave. The Corinthians don't have a lot to give, and they're not giving. And that's the problem. So again, verse 2, the Macedonians, they're going through a great trial of affliction, yet they have an abundance of joy despite their deep poverty, and they abound with riches of, my Bible says, liberality. Your Bible say that? What's your word?
Generosity.
Generosity. In fact, the meaning of the word is free giving without thought for self. You can even hear free in the word liberal, liberation, liberality. A free giving without any thought for self. What's this gonna mean to me if I give you whatever it is? It doesn't matter what it means to me. You need it, I'm going to give it. I'll get by. I'll be taken care of. I have faith that I'll be taken care of, so you take. That's liberality. That's the second key word in this verse. The first one is abounded. At the end of verse 2, through their deep poverty, they abounded with riches unto liberality, to go above and beyond. How much did they give? They only had so much to give, and yet they found a way to give more than they had to give. Now you try to make sense of that in terms of dollars and cents and napkin math on a piece of paper. I guess it'd be on a piece of napkin. When you try to figure out the actual budget, you try to figure out how much you can give. They figured out how much they could give, and they gave more, above and beyond what they could give. Verse 3. For to their power I bear record. Mine says power, ability. Better translation. To their ability I bear record. And beyond their ability, they were willing of themselves. They had this desire to give not just whatever they could give, but my Bible specifically says beyond their ability to give. How much can we give? Now let's give a few dollars more. How much can we give? Let's give a little bit on top of that. How do you even make that work? Like in the natural universe, if you only have so much to give, how can you give more? It's impossible. God is how you can give more than you are able to give. And if that's your attitude, you will find the means to give more. But if your attitude is worldly minded, I need to take care of what I have. I need to hold on to what I have. And I can only part with a little bit of amount. And I don't even want to part with that. If that's your attitude, you will not find the money to give. Because what you don't realize is you'll be finding the money to keep, not the money to give. You'll be looking for, well, I have this, but I need it for this. Or I have this, but I might need it for that. I know congregations. I know one not half an hour from where I grew up. I grew up on a farm. I don't know if you know that, but just a little bit from where I grew up, there was a little bitty country church. Still there. There's maybe 12 people who meet there. At their highest point of attendance, there were maybe 30 people who met there. And they've been in business for, it's 2023, maybe 100 years, okay? They probably have, I'm not exaggerating, $1 million in the bank account. They don't even have a full-time preacher. They only turn on the lights 2 hours a week. And you would not believe, a workout detected, good, it's good to know. You would not believe how many times I have heard preachers go there to fill in and be told, we can't pay anything, we'll have a potluck for you, we'll feed you in here. And I appreciate being fed when I preach somewhere, but if it is a fact that you have the means to give and you aren't giving, or when there's an opportunity for you to give to an event or to a cause or to a need, and you never find the reason because from your perspective, what you say is, well, we might have hail damage and we might need to fix our roof. When you've been in business for 100 years and it's never even sprinkled to damage your roof, but you might need it, you're hoarding $1 million when there's all kinds of opportunities to give, and you're finding reasons to keep and not reasons to give. That is the antithesis of Christianity. I'm not saying it's bad stewardship. It's good stewardship to prepare and to think how to spend, how to use. But if your attitude is, I'm finding reasons not to give, as opposed to, I need to find reasons to give, you've got it completely backwards. Am I crazy? I don't think that's crazy. These Macedonians went beyond their power to give. They understood the principle. They understood the reality that if a Christian gives from a giving heart, that God will take care of that Christian. And I always have to preface when I talk about this. I always have to be very careful because we've all heard what's the most charitable way to put it? Lies of Joel Osteen. We've all been aware either because we've actually heard him or sat in the audience. I've actually sat in the audience and listened to him, not on like a Tuesday or something. He came to Memphis one time to sit in the audience and listen to him, or we've seen him on TV, or we just have heard snippets on Twitter. So you hear that malarkey, that other words that he spouts. Okay, that's not truth, right? He says all that stuff and he preaches that message, and the gist of his message basically is, if you give to me, God will give to you. He exploits the idea of giving. He manipulates and twists the Bible truth about giving, and he turns it into a selfish act. He takes what Jesus says, he takes what Paul writes, he takes what the Bible teaches, principles in the Bible that are true principles about giving and charitable giving, and he manipulates his audience into thinking it's an exploitable tax loophole. Like, not a tax to the government tax, but like a God tax loophole. Like, you can deduct this from your taxes, and Uncle Sam will give you the money back, so you'll get it on the back end. And you can exploit that same loophole with God. Because God says, and he'll cite the verse, that if you give, he'll give to you. So what he tells his audience is, if you give to me, then God will give it right back to you. And he'll give you more. In fact, let's read the verse. Somebody read Luke 6:38. I want you to see this as a Bible truth that he is manipulating. Let's find the truth and let's see how he twists it. Luke 6:38. Somebody read.
Give, and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, or shaken together, and running over. Shall men give them into your bosom, for the same measure ye shall meet withal, it shall be measured to you again.
If you give, Jesus says, it shall be given to you. How much? Well, let's take your basket in which you're going to give your money out of. You got all your money in your basket, so you're going to give out of your basket. Jesus says if you give out of that basket, it will be put back into your basket. How much? So much so that if you press it down and shake it so you can find more room, smash it down to hold more, it will still be running over. God will give abundantly above all, beyond your capacity to give. He will give more to you so that you can give more. You give, he will give to you so that you can give, so that he will give to you so that you can give, and on the cycle will go. That's a Bible truth. That is not the so-called prosperity gospel, which is a false teaching. Joel Osteen is not the only charlatan who promotes that. You can turn on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, if there even is such a thing anymore. And you can find all those old white guys who do the same thing because they need a new jet. And they'll tell their audience, if you call this number and you give this donation, then God will give to you, and they'll cite the verse. But here's the difference between their lies and Jesus' truth. Their lies is, if you want to get money, give me money and God will give you money plus one. And so your giving becomes a way for you to make money. And that is not what giving is about. Giving is not an exploitation for you to get money. Giving is an opportunity for you to be charitable and sacrificial by giving out of faith, so that when you give, you are left with less than what you have, on the faith that God will take care of you, that he will give you abundant blessings and riches of a spiritual or physical kind by his discretion, so that you can continue to be charitable and continue to be good and continue to help people. If your giving is an attitude of, I want to help other people, then God will bless you. If your giving is an attitude of, I'll give so that I can get, then you will not be blessed. And that's why the people who follow Joel Osteen are poor, and Joel Osteen lives in a $6 million mansion, because they follow a lie. But there is still truth to be taught about giving. If you give, it shall be given to you. Pressed down, running over, shaken together, shall men pour into your bosom. So much so that whatever you give, you'll be blessed with. That's a Bible principle. The prosperity gospel has twisted and contorted and manipulated that message so much that preachers don't even preach that, because they don't want to be accused of preaching the prosperity gospel. The big difference is the prosperity gospel is about me getting. Bible giving is about you getting at my expense. A point which we're going to see very clearly in just a second when we get to Jesus. 2 Corinthians 8:4. Again, about the Macedonians. He says in verse 3 that they had ability beyond their willingness to give. They gave beyond that. Verse 4, and they prayed with us with much, my Bible says, entreaty. They prayed with great imploring. They begged us that we would receive the gift. Hold on to that thought. And take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. The word fellowship is used here not as a meal we share together or happy fun times we have together, but rather as an expression of contribution. We're sharing in this giving. You need, I have, I give. And in order for me to give to you, we must touch hands, because I'm putting the money in your hand. Fellowship. We're together, in it together, helping each other together. That's the fellowship of the ministering, the serving to the saints. But look at the beginning of the verse, verse 4. these Macedonians, when the messengers of Paul and everyone else came to collect their contribution, 1 Corinthians 16 said, you better get yours ready. They go to Macedonia. They were ready. And the Macedonians, despite the economic hardship they were in, despite every good reason they had to give, not a whole lot, they gathered so much, more than they should have been able to give, that when the apostle or his proxies saw this amount, they probably said something like, this is too much. You probably need to keep some of this. We'll take this much, but you should keep some of that. And they had to, according to the verse, beg them to receive the gift. When was the last time a church had to beg members to give less? When was the last time members had to beg the church to take more? It usually doesn't work that way. But that's what happened here in Macedonia. Verse 5. And this they did, not as we hoped, beyond that, but first they gave their own selves to the Lord, and unto us by the will of God. Verse 3 used this phrase, they were willing of themselves. They had this earnestness about them. They recognize it as an aspect of their Christianity. They're going to do this. And this they did, verse 5, giving their own selves first to the Lord. If you want to improve your giving, and that should be the goal of every Christian, because you should also be saying, I want to make my singing more, I hate to sound like a liberal, making more alive. You know, you don't want to just be dead up there when you're singing or standing or whatever. You want to really feel the song. You want to give it to God. Okay, work on that. How can you improve that? If you want to improve your prayer, that should be a goal. You set that goal and you start improving on it. Well, in the same way, you should have the attitude, I want to improve my giving. I want to find ways to give more to God and to spiritual needs, and not hoard it for myself and waste it on worldly things, but use it for spiritual purposes. That's their thought process. I belong to God. I'm giving myself to God, and the money will follow suit. It's just part and parcel with who I am. So they did this, giving them first themselves to the Lord, and then unto us as an expression of them giving to the Lord. They gave this money in the plate by the will of God. I'll give you a story. I don't usually do stories because they're a waste of time, but here it's relevant. When I was a member at the Forest Hill Church of Christ, as a student in the Memphis School of Preaching, I had only been a Christian for 3 years, right? And for the first year and a half of that, I was too young to drive, and my parents would not let me go to the brethren to worship with them. I had to worship with them at the Baptist church. So when I finally was able to drive, I was able to go worship. And so we're only talking like a year and a half at most, a year at most, when I was able to go worship with the brethren. And I was just a kid. And I was working at McDonald's and other little places like that. I think I was a call screener or something like that for a mortgage company. Little, dumb, I'm a kid learning how to do a job, right? So I was making a little bit of money, but I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have a mortgage to pay. I didn't have to buy groceries. I was still living at home. So I was just raking in money, right? But no one had taught me, because I didn't grow up in the church and I didn't grow up with Bible learning. No one taught me this, how to give. So all I understood about giving was just as a child, from a child's distorted perspective of just occasionally seeing my dad pull out his crispy $20 bill and put it in the plate as it passed by. That was my notion of giving. Then I go to preaching school. I've got a bunch of congregations who are giving me money so I can pay my bills, so I can pay for gas and pay for rent and pay for food, everything that I need, so I don't have to work. I can be in school full time. I got all this money coming in, and I'm still putting a 20 in the plate. And I'm not putting any thought into my giving. I'm not putting any consideration into a percentage. Not that you have to care about a percentage, but I wasn't even giving 10%, okay? It was just, I was tossing a 20 in the plate just whenever I thought about it, because I didn't put any thought into it. Thankfully, a sister who was a friend of mine was sitting right next to me, and she saw that on a Sunday. And she saw me toss a 20 in, and she said, I know you give more. I know you collect more support from the churches than to just give $20 in the plate. And she called me out without even me realizing what I was doing was wrong. And she walked me through the scriptures to show me what giving's supposed to look like. You better believe my giving improved. And I did not feel a begrudged attitude about it. Oh, I've got to give more of this money. Because first of all, it wasn't mine. It was the brethren's money they were giving me. But even later, when I started working full time, this is where the story doesn't work perfectly, because I'm still getting the brethren's money to live. But the principle is, I had a job, and I was working as a job, and I was getting paid for a job, and I still applied that principle of, what am I getting? God needs to get the first fruits of that, and then I live off the rest. When I had been living as, I'll spend and spend and spend, and then I'll give him a portion of what's left over, which is not even the worst thing. It's worse than the worst way to approach giving. So the attitude of giving is, give yourself to the Lord, and then the rest will follow suit. Verse 6. we desired Titus, that as he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace. This word grace is going to appear a lot in this chapter. The word grace in Christianity is a very charged word, usually means salvation. It just means gift. Your salvation is grace because it's a gift from God. In this context, it's the contribution. It's a gift, grace, gift given. So what he's saying here is, we sent Titus and whoever to collect from the Macedonians, and we expected Titus to come to you with the same attitude. We expect, future tense, Titus to come to you, Corinth, with the same charitable, sacrificial, selfless attitude toward giving. Verse 7. Therefore, as you abound in everything, in faith, utterance, knowledge, and diligence, in your love to us, see that you abound in this grace also. That little mini list he gives you sounds a lot like 1 Corinthians 12 through 14. Faith, knowledge, diligence, utterance, which is language. In other words, you've been given all these miraculous gifts. You've been given the gift of faith. You've been given a gift of knowledge. You've been given a gift of utterance, speaking, like in tongues, for example. You are above and beyond. You are way above the curve in terms of your ability to perform these supernatural gifts that have been given to you by God. But you're way behind the curve when it comes to giving naturally. Giving not supernaturally, but giving naturally that you've been given by the providence of God. The gifts you've been given by the supernatural power of God, the Holy Spirit, you love those. You love to fight over them and bicker over them and show them off. But here you've been given providentially too by God. You've been given financially by God, and you won't give. You're a little stingier there. So he calls them out on it. Given this grace too. Abound in this grace as much as you have the others, he says. Verse 8. I speak not by commandment. Oh, good. That means we don't have to give. It's an option. No, that's not his point. His point is to say, I shouldn't have to order you to do this. I'm telling you it's a natural extension of your Christianity. I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others. I'm using Macedonia to nudge you and prod you along, to prick your heart, to say, I need to be more like them. Prove the sincerity of your love. My Bible says, into verse 8. What's yours say? Same thing? See that your love is genuine. Well, how would your love be ungenuine? How would your love be insincere? I love those brethren over in Judea. Okay, well, they need some money. Well, I love them, and they're in my thoughts and prayers. Okay, yeah. But you need to put your hand in your wallet and pull out a fat stack and toss it over. And God will take care of you in the meantime. You say you love, you say you care, you say you're thinking about, but put your money where your mouth is. In fact, put your money where your heart is. Because your money is where your heart is. Your treasure is where your heart is. So your giving is literally the proof of your love. Those are just Jesus' words and Paul's words here. Somebody read Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21. Matthew 6, 19 through 21.
Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Now, in the context of Matthew 6, what Jesus is talking about is not a physical contribution there. He's literally talking about spiritual things. He's saying care more about the spiritual than the physical. But do you see how you get from that to this discussion? I'm going to hold on to this because I care about this. You may not say that you care about it. You may not even believe you care about it. But if you hold it as a treasure, that holds your heart. And it becomes more important to you than the spiritual things. Whereas, contrast to that, if the spiritual things are more important, then you'll happily give. You will not just give, you will happily give. Because you see the spiritual ramifications, the spiritual benefit of that. Which leads to 2 Corinthians 8:9. The most succinctly beautiful statement about giving there has ever been. And it's a completely unnecessary verse. You don't even need verse 9. You go from verse 8 to verse 10, and it's one complete sentence. But he sticks verse 9 in here, and it's the most beautiful, inspired declaration of what charitable grace is in the whole Bible. 2 Corinthians 8:9. Because you know the grace, same word he's been using all throughout this chapter. And over he's been using it to talk about contribution, a gift. Now let's put it in that word. Let's translate it that way. You know the gift of our Lord Jesus Christ. Though he was rich, full of potential gifts to give. For your sakes, he became poor. Well, how did he become poor for my sake? He had all these riches, and he gave all of his riches to me, so that I, through his poverty, might be rich. Jesus had all the riches. This is worldly, but we're applying it spiritually. Jesus had all the riches, and I had none of the riches. Jesus allowed his riches to go to bottom so that my riches could go up. He gave me all. He didn't clone his riches so that we both had. He took all of his riches and just gave them to me so that he had nothing, so that I could have everything. And I pause, and you think, but wait, Jesus gets to reign as a king, which if I know my history, kings tend to be rich. And yes, he is. He does reign. He is a king, and he is rich in terms of all the same ways he was, he is again. But that's the thing. He only got those riches because he gave all. He didn't get everything and then give what he had before. God didn't double his riches and he'd give me the initial amount. He gave until he had nothing. And then having done that, then God gave him riches. Then reward. I believe that's the principle that Jesus says. Give, which means you must first give. That means you must give in faith. You must give in the trust that it will be given to you. Jesus gave it all. And for Jesus, that meant dying on the cross, shedding his blood and dying brutally. And then at the end of that, then he gets to rise and get his riches. But he had to go through the death first. He had to give in faith that God would give to him. And his giving was not, I'm going to give you all this so that I can have something too. It was, I'm going to give you all this because you need it. And I trust that God will take care of me. And that's the principle of giving that's given to you. You know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Why does he say it like that? Because he just said in verse 8, I'm telling you to prove the sincerity of your love. Go to verse 10, skip verse 9. And herein I give my decree to you. This is expedient for you who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. Now here's what I'm telling you to do. Prove the sincerity of your love. Which you started proving a year ago. Continue proving it now. You don't need verse 9. Verse 9 is there just to twist the heart, to pluck the heartstring, to I don't want to say twist the knife because it makes it a bad thing. It's there to prick the heart, to get you emotionally charged and emotionally invested in what your giving looks like. That makes sense? I'm not talking to the walls here, I hope you're getting what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be mean. I know I sound like I'm mean. I'm not trying to be mean. And I just want you to appreciate that this is just as much a fundamental part of your Christianity as singing, or as prayer, or as taking the Lord's Supper, or as being baptized to become a Christian in the first place. God has given all to you. You must give all to him. That doesn't mean you must write a check for the exact amount that's in your bank account so that you are left with complete poverty. Jesus had a mission to do that involved that. The rich young ruler, he loved his riches more than God. And God called him out on it when he told him, then go sell what you have and give to the poor and come follow me. He told him that because he knew that was where the line was. I've kept all these commandments. I've done all these things. What am I lacking? I feel like I'm missing something. Yes, you are, because you still love your money. But you don't want to admit that. So I'll force you to admit it. Give all your riches to the poor. And it's not a universal commandment. It's a specific one to this guy. Because this guy loved his money more. Do you love your money more than God? Then his message to you is give all your money to the poor. But if you don't, then give as your heart desires. Verse 10. Herein I give my Bible says advice. Herein I give my decree, my message to you. Whatever is expedient to you, as you've done before, do it. You were doing it a year ago and then for some reason you stopped. My assumption is the false teachers who've got in their heads, don't give to Paul. Paul's no good. Don't trust him. I mean, he's already talked in this text, and he will talk again, that he's not a thief, that he's not a misuser of people's funds. These things don't just come out of nowhere. These are probably accusations against him. So probably they stopped gathering money to give to him. So he has to call them out. 11. Now therefore perform the doing of it. Look at this verse. That as there was a readiness to will, so there may be performance also out of that which you have. You say, you say, you say. You talk, you talk, you talk. Now put your money where your mouth is. Let the rubber meet the road. Do it. You say you were prepared to do it, so do it. Don't just talk about it, but do it. Listen, this congregation, these elders here, there's going to come a day sooner rather than later when they're going to step up there, or they're going to make one of us do it, stand up there and tell you guys, we need to raise money to update this building. Specifically, bathrooms. We need better handicap accessible bathrooms. So the day's going to come sooner rather than later when they are going to step up and tell you guys, we need money. Because those renovations are not cheap. And this building is not getting any younger. It needs updates. It needs upgrades so we can stay having a roof over our heads. Do you like having a roof over your head? The day's going to come when they're going to ask you to give. And God's going to ask you to give cheerfully, to give liberally, to give sacrificially, to give so that it may be given to you. But give in faith first. Verse 12. For if there first be a willing mind, it is accepted according to that which a man has, and not according to that which he has not. The Corinthians evidently pledged, for lack of a better word, to give to this need, to help these Judean Christians, whatever the issue was. Now they need to honor their pledge. Why haven't they? Like I say, probably people got in their ears and they decided it was not a good use of their money. But that's the devil finding you an excuse not to give. If your attitude is, I will give as God wants me to give, you will find ways to give. If that is not your attitude, if God doesn't have your heart, you will find reasons not to give. You will find ways to hold on to your money. And this is not a competition. The widow gave 2 mites. And that's not like the animal. She just gave 2 little tiny little coins. That's hardly worth, almost as worth half the animal. Not worth hardly anything, but it was all she had. Someone else gave out of their abundance. They gave a lot more than she had. It doesn't matter. Give what you can give. 13. For I mean not that other men be eased and you be burdened. You can take this statement on its own, and it's great and good. We can study it, but you can also flip it on its head. But I'll do that in just a second. God wants a cheerful giver. He does not want somebody who's constantly complaining about having to give, who constantly complains about his offering and how it's affecting his bottom line, his bottom dollar, etc. He wants a giver who gives with faith that God will take care of him. And Paul is saying that I'm not trying to put a burden on you. I'm not describing your giving in terms of negative words. It's not a burden. It's not a labor. It's not a hardship. It's an offering. It's a blessing. It's a grace. He's using positive, proactive words. It's the wrong attitude to say, I have to give X number of dollars of my hard-earned money when someone over there is giving a lot less. He uses an Old Testament illustration. Look at verse, I think it's in 14. Maybe, it's in 15. We'll get there. Look at verse 14. In fact, read 13 and 14 together. 13. For I mean not that other men be eased and you be burdened, but by an equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance may also be supply for your want, that there may be equality. Equality not in terms of the amount that you give, but equal in terms of the willingness to give. Right now, they need it. So you have it, you can give it. The tables may soon turn when you need it and they'll have it, and then you'll need it from them, and they'll charitably give it to you. But right now, it's you who are called to bat, to give, and to help. One day the tables will turn. He said in the previous verse, I'm not trying to make you a burden to someone. But think about it from this perspective. Flip that on its script. If they don't give as they should, that means Macedonia and Ephesus and Philippi and other churches in that area are going to have to give more to pick up the slack. And that will be hard on them. Now they're being a burden to them. And they're worried about the burden on them. Oh, the Corinthian burden. We're so burdened. But you're burdening everybody else just so you can keep your money. That's a worldly attitude. So the attitude should be, I will help you because I know you'll help me. Equal charity. Now, Old Testament principle, verse 15. As it is written, quote, he that had gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. That's Exodus 16. That's the giving of manna. Now think about this. Here I'm an Israelite needing my manna from God. Literally, God just forming bread from the dew. I don't have to work for it. I don't have to till anything. I don't have to grind any flour. It's just there, ready for the taking. I'm a family of 20, which means I need a family of 20's worth of manna. That's a lot of manna. Over here, my neighbor he's a family of 4. He only needs a family of 4's worth of manna. A lot less manna than he needs. God is giving to me, how much manna does a family of 4 need? A family of 4 need. Let's say 12 loaves of manna. Do they eat one? How much manna do they eat? Two times a day? 3 times a day? Jim LaRue, do you know? He's over there yawning. I don't remember either.
Just give it to the next day.
Just give it to the next day. Okay, well, let's pretend that they needed 1 loaf for each meal. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which I don't think they did the Henry Ford thing, but we'll say that, okay? 4 people need 12 loaves of manna. We'll go with it, all right? Family of 20 will need 60 loaves of manna, which means God is giving to this family only 12 loaves, and he's giving to this family 60 loaves. This family could, if with a worldly mindset, think, how come he gets more than me? But he is not giving more or less. He's giving according to that which you need. Stop worrying about who you are compared to someone else. It's not a competition. God blesses you as you need to be blessed. That's this point here. Whatever you needed, you got. You had nothing left over, and no one lacked anything. You got exactly as much as you needed, because God never overdoes it or underbakes it. Verse 16. But thanks be to God, who put the same earnest care into the heart of Titus for you. Titus was his guy to go out and collect a lot of this money, based on the context. That seems clear. So Titus had this great eagerness, this great earnest care, this desire to do this. Verse 17. For he indeed accepted the exhortation, but being more forward of his own account, he went unto you. Who sent Titus to the Corinthians? The way Paul tells it, Titus was begging to go. Preachers today, I don't want to talk about giving, but the elders are making me talk about giving. They're not right now. That's what preachers say. But Titus was wanting to do this. He was eager to do this. For the same way that brethren, you ever get excited when you hear there's an area? Well, you know what? Not anymore, we don't. Back in the day, brethren used to get really jazzed about an area singing. And I guess we didn't have Netflix, so the brethren were gathering to sing. That's great. It's not just uplifting and encouraging. It's also just a nice evening. Let's go together and just sing a bunch of old hymns. So brethren look forward to opportunities to go and sing together. I have never once heard of an area-wide giving. I've heard of area-wide singings. I've heard of area-wide prayer nights. I've heard of area-wide scripture readings. I've never heard of an area-wide, let's all pool our money together. But your Bible talks about that all the time. Like the very first thing the early church did was sold all their possessions and gave so that the brethren could have who didn't have. An area-wide giving is a Bible principle. But you get stoned if you suggest something like that today. Boy, Titus was eager and excited. I can't wait to go to the giving. That was his attitude. It should be ours too. 18. And we have sent him with the brother. Who's the brother? Some other guy besides Titus, not Paul. Maybe Luke. That's a good presumption, but just a presumption. Whose praises in the gospel throughout all the churches. Luke's a frequent companion, running buddy of these guys. That's why I say that. But that's just a guess. 19. And not only that also, but who was also chosen of the churches to travel with us with this grace, which is administered to us by the glory of the same Lord and the declaration of your ready mind. We're on our way because we trust that you will have a heart that's ready to give. We're acting on faith. 20. Avoiding this, that no man should blame us in this abundance which is administered by us. Having a lot of people responsible. We have several people who are going to take care of this fund. This has been administered. And we're going to be the facilitators of the distribution of this. It's not, as his critics are probably saying, Paul's this one guy, he's hoarding all the money. Paul is not like Joel Osteen. He's not buying a jet with all of your money. So he's got Paul, and there's Titus, there's probably Luke, maybe Timothy's around. There's other guys who are around who are going to be collectively looking over this. It's not a situation like Judas, who had the purse and probably shouldn't have, things like that. There's several people involved in this, so no one can blame us. We're blameless in this. We're above accusation in handling of your money. Providing things, 21, providing things honest. Not only in the sight of the Lord, but in the sight of men, which is a good Christian principle to have. Because people, almost by nature, but not, because by nature we're in the image of God, but by our second nature, by habit, people are dishonest. People usually drop the ball. People usually are easily tempted to take advantage of money when money comes their way. So Paul takes extra steps to make sure he is above reproach. Honest, not just in the sight of God, because you just need one person for that, but in the sight of all men, you can tell. 22. We're going to do it. We're going to finish it. 22. And we have sent with him our brother, whom we have oftentimes proved diligent in many things, but now much more diligent upon the great confidence which I have in you. You can trust him with your money as much as I trust you to give it to him. 23. Whether any do inquire of Titus, if you have any questions about Titus, who's this Titus guy? Why am I giving him my big sack of money with the $sign on it? If you have a question about Titus, he is my partner and fellow helper concerning you. Or our brethren, if you have a worry about who it may be, if it's Luke or whoever else. They are the messengers of the churches and the glory of Christ. I put my seal of approval on them. And as much as Paul is being under scrutiny right now, Paul has proven himself over and over to be a man who keeps his word and you can trust with what you have. And he says, I trust them. Last verse. So show them and show all the churches the proof of your love. What is giving? It is putting your money where your mouth is. I love Jesus. Prove it. Open your wallet. And of your boasting on our behalf. Our boasting on your behalf, I should say. We look at this church. They are a charitable church. Now don't make me a liar. End of chapter. I did it. All right, we're done. Go home.